Now, sometimes it's possible for us to forgive others, but there are some individuals who can't forgive themselves. I have come in contact with quite a number of people that way. They live in the past. If you live in the past, you live with guilt. If you live in the future, you live with slavish fear. And think about that. How much of our time is either taken up with the past or the future? And what do we do? That's a kind of a teeter-totter syndrome. And what do we do in the process? We rob the present moment. And that's where real conversion takes place. When you really come to the idea of really living your life as fully as possible, each day, each moment, you'll see how that will change your life. And always remember, God has more readily forgiven you than you have forgiven yourself. And I'm convinced of this, that when you get to heaven someday, you're going to understand how God more readily forgave you. Why spend all that time being so hard on yourself? But often people will say to me, too, well, it's easy for you, Father, to get up there and talk about the sacrament of reconciliation. But I become very fearful of this. And it becomes evident to me often when individuals come into the reconciliation room, and instead of saying, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, they'll start off by saying, bless us, O Lord, and these are gifts. Okay, relax. Take it easy. This sacrament is not a sacrament of fear, but it's a sacrament of tremendous joy, peace, healing. So tonight what I'd like to do is to give you some examples of what I consider good confessions. Now what I want to make very clear to you, I hope everybody hears this, these are not actual confessions. Everybody hear that? We don't sit in the reconciliation room and take down the best ones. So here's an example of a woman who comes in and says, I just found out that my husband cheated on me, and I have become very resentful. You want to find out where your sins are? Go into the area of your feelings. There's another example of a widow who comes to the realization that she could really do more to reach out to others that are rather poor, whatever. And she also says, I have not voted in the last election. I said, You know, I hear a lot of sins of commission, but I hear very few sins of omission. And yet, how are we going to be judged someday? Jesus says, I was hungry and you didn't give me to eat. I was thirsty and you didn't give me to drink. I was naked and you didn't clothe me. And we'll say, when were you hungry? When were you naked? When were you thirsty? And Jesus is going to say to you and to me, what you've done to the least of my brothers and sisters, you have done to me, to Jesus. An example of a single person. A person comes in and says, I finally came to the realization that I am a racist. I said, wow, that's a tremendous gift to be able not only to come to the realization, but to acknowledge it. How many of us here tonight could say, I'm not a racist. I never make any derogatory remarks concerning any other nationality. And of course you have course, we have even smaller children coming. You never know what they're going to say. Reminds me of this dad that came in, and he confessed that I committed adultery 4 times. The priest said, what? I committed adultery 4 times. How old are you? I'm 9 years old. Well, what do you mean you committed adultery 4 times? Well, I committed a sin against an adult 4 times. But I have found that if individuals zoom in, say, on one specific area, rather than to give me this grocery list of sins, because always remember, all your venial sins are included in every encounter with Christ in the sacrament. And it's so true. They are. We have an obligation as far as serious sin, but as far as venial sin, they're all included. They're all included. So I often, whenever individual at the end of whenever they're finished, they'll say, now, what's the one area you want to zoom in on? I say, oh, I want to be more kind, I want to be more patient, I want to be more forgiving. One area, oh, I want to be more kind, I want to be more patient. One area, till I finally get them to the area of patience. It's interesting to go into the derivation of that word, because it comes from a Latin word, patio, which means to suffer. If we're going to be patient with ourselves, because often the reason we are impatient with others is because we're impatient with ourselves, or patient with others, there's no doubt in my mind, we are going to suffer. That's right. But that's the marvel of this particular sacrament. It's tremendous power, at least that I have seen in people's lives, and how it's changed people's lives, and how it's not this sacrament of fear, but rather a sacrament of tremendous peace, joy, happiness, healing. So in that context tonight, I kindly invite you to kneel, and I'll invite you to make an examination